Hello there. It looks like I have two people in my chat who have come to see me play. I'm just going to turn that music down a little bit. Is anyone, if you're welcome to lurk, I always say you're welcome to lurk, more power to you. If you want to chat and engage, I would love that. I would love this to be like a conversation. But for the moment, I am kind of just waiting for more people to come out. But if there is anyone in the chat and there is anybody listening, can you let me know if the music is too loud? Can you hear me relative to the music? Because I don't have any way of judging this. Now I'm not even sure if there's one person in here. Either way, I'm going to wait for a minute before I launch into talking about AE Waite. This video will be saved for posterity, uploaded to YouTube, etc. So even if nobody comes, maybe it'll have legs. It'll have a life of its own going forward. So I'm going to just go ahead and give the same sort of presentation that I would give either way. But hopefully some people come in. And I just want to wait for anyone to do so. I'm sure everyone is enjoying Saturnus' stream. More power to him. If the one person in here, who might be me, actually, hasn't checked him out, please do check him out. He is clearly very literate in the occult, and he is someone that he's the kind of person that I would like to see more. I'd like to see more of that energy in streams. Watching his stream a little bit, he can be a little esoteric, so I can imagine. This is not intended as critique. I can imagine people who want like really practical answers, like yes or no sort of answers, being frustrated by his style. But if you go in and you listen and you pay attention, he has a lot of really interesting things to say. His reading is extremely advanced, and I'm hoping that this kind of stream will sort of prepare you for that. I'm hoping that these streams will sort of elucidate some of what someone like Saturnus would say, because there are a lot of people who are not as necessarily steeped in the mysteries, and don't necessarily know what a decan is, don't necessarily know what like how the Kabbalah works and all of this kind of stuff. And like that's kind of the niche that I'm trying to kind of hoping to fill, is that kind of intermediate niche between like there's an interest in tarot cards, and there's a whole system underneath tarot cards, and I'm hoping to kind of bridge the gap between someone who's just interested in tarot cards to somebody who understands that whole system, such that they can grasp what someone like Saturnus, or like a serious, I consider him a serious practitioner, just judging from the half hour I watched him, judging from his style, his manner of speaking. He seems to be a serious practitioner, and I think that in order to really understand that, in order to grasp that fully, there's a lot of background knowledge that needs to be in place. So I'm hoping to kind of fill that niche. I'm kind of just filling time here. I only have one viewer still. I'm hoping to get more. But I could just launch into it, but then I don't want to, like, if viewers do come in, I don't necessarily want them to be lost. But part of me just wants to say fuck it and just do it. I'll wait for one more viewer. If I get one more viewer, then I'll launch into it. As you can see, I'm starting on class 2. Class 1 was on the major arcana. You can see my coverage of that first chapter on my YouTube channel. That first class is really boring, mainly because he's largely trying to dispel myths about what the cards don't mean. And as such, he's not giving a lot of content, and he's speaking very cryptically. He's speaking very coyly. There's not a lot of content there to, like, sink your teeth into. He is doing a thing which is fairly common within philosophical texts, and especially esoteric texts, where you put a whole bunch of boring stuff up front. Yay! Hi, Mael. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. Mael. I'm glad that someone is listening. So he puts a bunch of boring stuff up front. And Mael, make sure that you save some brownies for me, by the way. He puts a whole bunch of boring stuff up front, so that only, like, the really hardcore people will make it through the boring stuff, and make it into the meat of the matter, the heart of the matter. So I decided to sort of record that and put it on my YouTube channel, and now I'm starting with sort of chapter 2, which is the Lesser Arcana. I actually think that the Lesser Arcana is more interesting than the Major Arcana, which might be an idiosyncratic quality of me as a reader, but I happen to think that's true. So I'm just going to launch into it then, because I do have someone here. Class 2, the 4 suits, otherwise Lesser Arcana. Now, A.E. Waite's an interesting character. Let me give a little bit of background on him. He, of course, is the person who designed the Rider-Waite deck, and Pamela Coleman-Smith, of course, illustrated it. Her artwork is beautiful. He was an initiate in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. The Golden Dawn, one of their levels of initiation was to paint your own tarot deck or design your own tarot deck, and the Rider-Waite-Smith deck was his attempt at doing so. It's an interesting deck. When he went to go and publish it, he did fill the deck with blinds. If you don't know what blinds are, blinds are misdirections, lies, misstatements, a few things. There's an example of a blind right here, actually. In fact, right on this page, and I'll show you that when I get into it. But he filled his deck with blinds. So there are a lot of tarot readers running around who are like Rider-Waite readers who have slightly misinterpreted the cards if we think that the right interpretation of the cards is the Golden Dawn interpretation. There are other interpretations of the cards, of course. I'm not expert in these. I am very much a student of the Golden Dawn system of magic. So I don't want to speak for like the French system. I don't want to speak for the Marseille deck or the Jurodowski stuff or anything like that. I'm just going to be speaking for the Golden Dawn, at least for the moment. And so we begin with Rider-Waite. Now that that's out of the way, let me begin. The resources of interpretation have been lavished, if not exhausted, on the 22 Trumps Major, the symbolism of which is unquestionable. There remain the four suits, being the wands or scepters, ex hypothesi, in the archaeology of the subject, the antecedents of diamonds in modern cards, cups corresponding to hearts, swords, which answer to clubs as the weapon of chivalry, is in relation to the peasant's quarterstaff or the Alsatian bludgeon, and finally pentacles, also called deniers, and money, which are the prototypes of spades. In the old as in the new suits, there are 10 numbered cards, but in the tarot, there are 4 court cards allocated to each suit, or a knight in addition to king, queen, and knave. Now, I want to back up a little bit because this is an example of a blind. Actually, I believe it's the case. I could be wrong on this, but I believe it's the case that the coin suit corresponds to diamonds, and the spades corresponds to swords. Cups is hearts, and wands is clubs, right? And you can see how that would make sense, right? A diamond is a unit of currency, right? So of course coins would be tied to diamonds. Cups are, of course, are always in the heart. If you read tarot, swords or spades, and clubs. To have a club, right, is shaped like a wand, right? So here he gives an outright misinterpretation, right? Now I could be the one who's wrong here, but this reads to me like a blind. This reads to me like him trying to misdirect, give slight misinformation about the cards. The reason he's doing this is because he took vows when he entered the Golden Dawn to preserve secrecy. So he's throwing blinds in as a way of trying to misdirect, as a way of trying to divert people's attention from the real mysteries. It looks like we have a second person in here. You're more than welcome to lurk if you'd like to chat. I would absolutely love to have a back and forth. We're just starting on the small cards, which is the second section to the pictorial key to the tarot. Now, he's on to the court cards. The knave is a page, valet, or demoiselle. Most correctly, he is an esquire, presumably in the service of the knight. But there are certain rare sets in which the page becomes a maid of honor, thus pairing the sexes in the tetrad of the court cards. Now, this is actually This is how the Thoth deck works. The Thoth has princesses instead of knaves. There are actually Kabbalistic reasons why I much prefer that. Why I much prefer princesses to knaves, but I will get into that perhaps when we talk about Kabbalah. Um, There are naturally distinctive features in respect to the several pictures, by which I mean that the King of Wands is not exactly the same personage as the King of Cups, even after allowance has been made for the different emblems they bear. But the symbolism resides in their rank and in the suit to which they belong. So also the smaller cards, which until now have never been issued pictorially, in these our modern days, depend on the particular meaning attached to their numbers in connection with the particular suit. So, what's he saying there? If you imagine a deck of playing cards, a deck of 52 playing cards, there are no pictures on them. They're called pips. You see like the 8 of hearts, you just see 8 hearts, right? And what he's saying is that the tarot has traditionally been depicted the same way. The ace through 10 has traditionally been depicted such that you have pips, as opposed to having pictures which are supposed to communicate their meanings. He's saying that this has never been done before until his deck, which may well be true. Now, they depend on their particular meaning, attaching to their numbers in connection with the particular suit. This is partially true. This is another example of, it's not exactly a blind, but it's partially true. There are 4 components to a small card. Here he says there are 2. There's the suit and there's the number. That is accurate. However, there is also astrological correspondence. So there is also a planet and there is a zodiacal attribution as well. So I don't know if I would necessarily think of this as like a blind, full blown. Maybe he gets into this later. I'm not sure. But it's certainly not evident in his deck that there are these astrological correspondences. I reserve, therefore, the details of the Lesser Arcana till I come to speak in the second part of the rectified and perfected tarot, which accompanies this work. The consensus of divinatory meanings attached to both the greater and lesser symbols belong to the third part. So he's saying that he's going to interpret these later on in the work. I could have just jumped to that part, but I figured I'd start here instead. We're going to start getting into the meat of things, but this tarot and history chapter kind of attracted me, and I thought that it might be interesting for a stream. And also that reading through that lesser arcana section gave some good examples of what a blind looks like. And I think that that's a really important lesson for anybody who's interested in any occult or magical matters, particularly historically. These days, people tend to talk very openly, but if you want to interpret historical texts, esoteric historical texts, you're going to have to do some work. Now, part 4, the tarot in history. Our immediate next concern is to speak of their cards in their history, so that the speculations and reveries which have been perpetuated and multiplied in the schools of occult research may be disposed of once and for all, as intimated in the preface hereto. Let it be understood at the beginning of this point that there are several sets or sequences of ancient cards which are only in part of our concern. The Tarot of the Bohemians by Papoose, which I have recently carried through the press, revising the imperfect rendering, has some useful information in this connection, and except for the omission of dates and other evidences of the archaeological sense, it will serve the purpose of the general reader. I do not propose to extend it in the present place in any matter that can be called considerable, but certain additions are desirable, and so also is a distinct mode of presentation. So basically, he's just giving a shout out to Papoose here. That's all he's saying there. Among ancient cards which are mentioned in connection with the tarot, there are firstly those of Baldini, which are the celebrated set attributed by tradition to Andrea Mantegna. Though this view is now generally rejected, their date is supposed to be around 1470, and it is thought that they are not more than 4 collections extant in Europe. A copy or reproduction referred to 1485 is perhaps equally rare. A complete set contained 50 numbers divided into 5 denaries or sequences of 10 card each. There seems to be no record that they were used for the purposes of a game, whether of chance or skill. They could scarcely have lent themselves to divination or any form of fortune telling, while it would be more than idle to impute a profound symbolical meaning to their obvious emblematic designs. The first denarii embodies conditions of life as follows: the beggar, the knave, the artisan, the merchant, the noble, the knight, the dog, the king, the emperor, the pope. The second contains the muses and their divine leader: Calliope, Urania, Terpsichore, Erato, Polyhymnia, Thalia, Melpomene, Eutrope, Clio, Apollo. This is going to get boring. I'm sorry, guys. The third combines part of the liberal arts and sciences with other departments of human learning as follows: grammar, logic, rhetoric, geometry, arithmetic, music, poetry, philosophy, astrology, theology. The fourth denarii completes the liberal arts and enumerates the virtues: astronomy, chronology, cosmology, temperance, prudence, strength, justice, charity, hope, faith. The fifth and last denarii presents the system of the heavens: Moon, Mercury, Venus, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, an eighth sphere, premium mobile, first cause. Okay. Sorry. We must set aside the fantastic attempts to extract complete tarot sequences out of these denaries. We must forbear from saying, for example, that the conditions of life correspond to the trumps major, the muses to pentacles, the arts and sciences to cups, the virtues, etc., to scepters. What's up, Muso? This kind of thing can be done by a process of mental contortion, but it has no place in reality. At the same time, it is hardly possible that the individual cards should not exhibit certain and even striking analogies. The Baldini King, Knight, and Knave suggest the corresponding court cards of the minor arcana. The Emperor, Pope, Temperance, Strength, Justice, Moon, and Sun are common to the Mantegna and trumps major of any tarot pack. Predisposition has also connected the beggar and the fool, Venus and the star, Mars and the chariot, Saturn and the hermit, and even Jupiter are alternatively the first cause with the tarot card of the world. And then he gives a reference there. I don't know what it's going to be. I'm not going to jump ahead. But the most salient features of the trumps major are wanting in the Mantegna set, and I do not believe that the ordered sequence in the latter case gave birth, as it has been suggested, to the others. Romain Merlin maintained this view and positively assigned the Baldini cards to the end of the 14th century. I'm going to skip this sentence right here and read his footnote. The beggar is practically naked, and the analogy to the fool is constituted by the presence of 2 dogs, one of which seems to be flying at his legs. The Mars card depicts a sword-bearing warrior in a canopied chariot, to which, however, no horses are attached. Of course, if the Baldini cards belong to the close of the 15th century, there is no question at issue that the tarot was known in Europe long before that period. Okay, now back to the main story. If it be agreed that, except accidentally and sporadically, the Baldini emblematic or allegorical pictures have only a shadowy and occasional connection with tarot cards, and whatever their most probable date, They can have supplied no originating motive. It follows that we are still seeking not only an origin in place and time for the symbols with which we are concerned, but a specific case of their manifestation on the continent of Europe to serve as a point of departure, whether backward or forward. Now, it is well known that in the year 1393, the painter Charles, and I'm not going to pretend to pronounce that, the painter Charles, who for no reason that I can trace, has been termed an occultist and Kabbalist by one indifferent English writer, designed and illuminated some kind of cards for the diversion of Charles VI of France when he was in mentally ill health, and the question arises whether anything can be ascertained of their nature. The only available answer is that at Paris, in the Bibliothèque des Rois, there are 17 cards drawn and illuminated on paper. They are very beautiful, antique, and priceless. The figures have a background of gold and are framed in a silver border, but they are accompanied by no inscription and no number. It is certain, however, that they include tarot trumps major, the list of which is as follows: the Fool, Emperor, Pope, Lovers, Wheel of Fortune, Temperance, Fortitude, Justice, Moon, Sun, Chariot, Hermit, Hangman, Death, Tower, and the Last Judgment. There are also 4 tarot cards at the Musée Carrier, Venice, and 5 others elsewhere, making 9 in all. They include 2 pages or knaves, 3 knights, and 2 queens, thus illustrating the minor arcana. These collections have all been identified with the set produced by this Charles painter, whose last name I'm not going to try to pronounce. But the inscription was disputed so far back as the year 1848, and it is not apparently put forward at present day, even by those that are anxious to make evident the antiquity of the tarot. It is held that they are all of Italian and some, at least, certainly of Venetian origin. We have in this manner our requisite point of departure in respect of place at least. It has been further stated with authority that Venetian tarots are the old and true form, which is the parent of all others, but I infer that the complete sets of major and minor arcana belong to much later periods. The pack is thought to have consisted of 78 cards. Of course, the normal pack consists of 72. Notwithstanding, however, the preference shown towards the Venetian tarot, it is acknowledged that some portions of Minciate or Florentine set must be allocated to the period between 1413 and 1418. These were once in the possession of Countess Gonzaga at Milan. A complete Minciate pack contained 97 cards, and in spite of these vestiges, it is regarded, speaking generally, as a later development. There were 41 trumps major, and the additional numbers being borrowed are reflected from the Baldini emblematic set. In the court cards of the minor arcana, the knights were monsters of the centaur type, while the knaves were sometimes warriors and sometimes serving men. Another distinction dwelt upon is the prevalence of Christian medieval ideas and the utter absence of any Oriental suggestion. The question, however, remains whether there are Eastern traces in any tarot cards. We come in fine to the Bolognese tarot. I don't know if that's how you pronounce that. Bolognese, I think. Sometimes referred to sometimes referred to as that of Venice, and having the trumps major complete, but numbers 20 and 21 are transposed. In the minor arcana, the 2, 3, 4, and 5 of the small cards are omitted, with the result that there are 62 cards in all. The termination of the trumps major and the representation of the Last Judgment is curious and a little arresting as a point of symbolism, but this is all that it seems necessary to remark about the pack of Bologna, except that it is said to have been invented, or as a tarot more correctly modified, about the beginning of 15th century by an exiled prince of Pisa resident in the city. The purpose for which they were used is made tolerably evident by the fact that in 1423, Saint Bernardin of Siena preached against playing cards and other forms of gambling. 40 years later, the importation of cards into England was forbidden, the time being that of King Edward IV. This is the first certain record of the subject in our country. By our country, of course, he is referring to England. It is different It is difficult to consult perfect examples of the sets enumerated above, but it is not difficult to meet with detailed and illustrated descriptions. I should add, provided always that the writer is not an occultist, for accounts emanating from that source are usually imperfect, vague, and preoccupied by considerations which cloud the critical issues. An instance in point is offered by certain views which have been expressed on the Montaigne Codex, if I may continue to dignify card sequences with the title of this kind. It has been ruled, as we have seen, in occult reverie, that Apollo and the nine muses are in correspondence with the pentacles, but the analogy does not obtain in a working set of research, and reverie must border on nightmare before we can identify astronomy, chronology, and cosmology with the suit of cups. The Baldini figures which represent these subjects are emblems of their period and not symbols like the tarot. So this is all history stuff, right? Where what Waite is trying to do here, I'm just gonna clarify this. What Waite is trying to do here, he's trying to prove or demonstrate that the tarot does not go back before the 15th century. In conclusion, as to this part, I observe that there has been a disposition among experts to think that the trumps major were not originally connected with the numbered suits. I do not wish to offer a personal view. I am not an expert in the history of games of chance, and I hate the profanum vulgus of divinatory devices, but I venture, under all reserves, to intimate that if later research should justify such a learning, then, except for the good old art of fortune telling and its tamperings with so called destiny, it will be so much the better for the greater arcana. So far as regards what is indispensable as preliminaries to the historical aspect of the tarot cards, and I will now take up the speculative side of the subject and produce its tests of value. In my preface to the Tarot of the Bohemians, I have mentioned that the first writer who made known the fact of the cards was the archaeologist Court de Gebelin, who just prior to the French Revolution occupied several years in the publication of his Monde Primitive, which he extended to 9 quarto volumes. He was a learned man in his epoch, a high-grade Mason, a member of a historical lodge, and a virtuoso with a profound and lifelong interest in the debate on universal antiquities before a science of the subject existed. Even at this day, his memorials and dissertations collected under the title which I have quoted are worth possessing. By an accident of things, he became acquainted with the tarot when it was quite unknown in Paris, and at once conceived that it was the remnants of an Egyptian book. He made inquiries concerning it and ascertained that it was in circulation over a considerable part of Europe, Spain, Italy, Germany, the south of France. It was in use as a game of chance or skill after the ordinary manner of playing cards, and he ascertained further how the game was played. But it was in use also for the higher purpose of divination or fortune telling, and with the help of a learned friend, he discovered the significance attributed to the cards, together with the method of arrangement adopted for this purpose. In a word, he made a distinct contribution to our knowledge, and he is still a source of reference, but it is only on the question of fact. It is on the question of fact only, and not on the beloved hypothesis that the tarot contains pure Egyptian doctrine. However, he set the opinion, which is prevalent to this day throughout the occult schools, that in the mystery and wonder, the strange night of the gods, the unknown tongue, and the undeciphered hieroglyphics which symbolize Egypt at the end of the 18th century, the origin of the cards was lost. So dreamed one of the characteristic literati of France, and one can almost understand and sympathize, for the country about the Delta and the Nile was beginning to loom largely in the preoccupation of learned thought. An omni ignolium pro Egyptico, if that's what it is, was the way of delusion to which many minds tended. It was excusable enough then, but the madness has continued, and within the charmed circle of the occult sciences still passes from mouth to mouth. There is no excuse for this. Let us see, therefore, the evidence produced by M. Court de Gebelin in support of his thesis, and that I may deal justly, as it shall be summarized as far as possible in his own words. 1. The figures and arrangement of the game are manifestly allegorical. 2. The allegories are in conformity with the civil, philosophical, and religious doctrine of ancient Egypt. 3. If the cards were modern, no high priestess would be included among the greater arcana. 4. The figure in question bears the horns of Isis. 5. The card, which is called the Emperor, has a scepter terminating in a triple cross. 6. The card entitled the Moon, who is Isis, shows drops of rain or dew in the act of being shed by the luminary, and these, as we have seen, are the tears of Isis, which swelled the waters of the Nile and fertilized the fields of Egypt. 7. The 17th card, or the star, is the dog star, Sirius, which was consecrated to Isis and symbolized the opening of the year. 8. The game played with the tarot is founded on the sacred number 7, which was of great importance in Egypt. 9. The word tarot is pure Egyptian, in which the language ter, way or round, and ro, king or royal. It signifies, therefore, the royal road of life. 10. Alternatively, it is derived from a doctrine, Rosh equals Mercury equals Thoth. And the article T, in sum, Tarosh, and therefore the tarot is the book of Thoth, or the table of the doctrine of Mercury. I actually love this. The tarot is the book of Thoth, because as far as I'm aware, this is the first reference in print to the tarot being called the book of Thoth, except perhaps in the Gebelin. And I love that Aleister Crowley titles his book on the tarot the book of Thoth, as a troll, right? Because he doesn't buy this hypothesis either. Such is the testimony, it being understood that I have set aside several causal statements for which no kind of justification is produced. These are 10 pillars which support the edifice of the thesis, and the same are pillars of sand. The tarot is, of course, allegorical. That is to say, it is symbolism, but allegory and symbolism are Catholic. Of all countries, nations, and times, they are not more Egyptian than Mexican. They are of Europe and Cathay, of Tibet beyond the Himalayas, and of the London gutters. As allegory and symbol, the cards correspond to many types of ideas and things. They are universal and not particular. And the fact that they do not especially and peculiarly respond to Egyptian doctrine, religious, philosophical, or civil, is clear from the failure of Court de Gebelin to go further than the affirmation. The presence of a high priestess amongst the trumps major is more easily explained as the memorial of some popular superstition. That worship of Diana, for instance, the persistence of which in modern Italy has been traced with such striking results by Leland. We also have to remember the universality of horns in every cultus, not excepting that of Tibet. The triple cross is preposterous as an instance of Egyptian symbolism. It is a cross of the patriarchal see, both in Greek and Latin, of Venice, of Jerusalem, for example. It is the form of signing used to this day by priests and laity of the Orthodox Rite. I pass over the idle allusion to the tears of Isis because other occult writers have told us that they are the Hebrew Jodes. As regards to the 17th card, it is the star Sirius or another, as predisposition pleases. The number 7 was certainly important to Egypt, and any treatise on numerical mysticism will show that the same statement applies everywhere, even if we elect to ignore the 7 Christian sacraments and the gifts of the divine spirit. Finally, as regards to the etymology of the word tarot, it is sufficient to observe that it was offered before the discovery of the Rosetta Stone, and when there was no knowledge of the Egyptian language. The thesis of Court de Gebelin was not suffered to repose undisturbed in the mind of the age, appealing to the learned exclusivity by means of quarto volume. It created the opportunity of tarot cards in Paris as the center of France and all things French in the universe. The suggestion that divination by cards had behind it the unexpected warrants of ancient hidden science, and that the root of the whole subject was in the wonder and mystery of Egypt, reflected thereon almost a divine dignity. Out of the purliest of occult practices, cartomancy emerged into fashion and assumed for the moment almost pontifical vestures. The first to undertake the role of bateleur, magician, and juggler, was the illiterate but zealous adventurer Eliot. The second was as a kind of high priestess, full of intuitions and revelations, was Mill? Lenormand, but she belongs to a later period, while lastly came to Julia Orsini, who is referable to a Queen of Cups rather in the tatters of clairvoyance. I am not concerned with these people as tellers of fortune. When destiny itself was shuffling and cutting cards for the game of universal revelation, or for such courts and courtiers as were those of Louis the 18th, Charles the Ninth, and Louis Philippe, um, but under the occult designation of Atea, the transliteration of the name Aliet, that Perquier, maybe, took himself with high seriousness and posed rather as a priest of the occult sciences than as an ordinary adept in l'art de tirer les cartes. Even at this day, there are people like Dr. Papoose who have sought to save some part of his bizarre system from oblivion. The long and heterogeneous story of Le Monde Primitif had come to the end of its telling in 1782, and in 1783 the tracts of Atea had begun pouring from the press, testifying that they had already spent 30, nay, almost 40 years in the study of Egyptian magic, and that he had found the final keys. They were, in fact, the keys of the Tarot, which was a book of philosophy, and the book of Thoth. But at the same time, it was actually written by 17 magi in a temple of fire on the borders of the Levant, some 3 leagues from Memphis. It contained the science of the universe, and the cartomancists proceeded to apply it to astrology, alchemy, and fortune telling without the slightest diffidence or reserve as to the fact that he was driving a trade. I have really little doubt that he considered it a genuine mater, and that he himself was the first person whom he conceived concerning this system. But the point which we have to notice is that in this manner the antiquity of the tarot generally trumpeted forth. The little books of Atea are proof positive that he did not know even his own language when in the course of time he reproduced a reformed tarot. Even those who think of him tenderly admit that he spoiled his symbolism, and in respect of antiquities, he had only Court de Gebelin and his universal authority. The cartomancists succeeded one another in the manner in which I have mentioned, and of course there were rival adepts of these less than least mysteries, but the scholarship of the subject, if it can be said to have come into existence, reposed after all in the quarto of Court de Gebelin for something more than 60 years. On his authority there is very little doubt that everyone who became acquainted, by theory or practice, by causal or special concern, with the question of tarot cards, accepted their Egyptian character. It is said that people are taken commonly at their own valuation, and following as it does the line of least resistance, the unsolicitous general mind assuredly accepts archaeological pretensions in the sense of their own daring, and those who put them forward. The first who appeared to reconsider the subject with some presumptive titles to a hearing was a French writer, Duchesne's, but I am compelled to pass him over with a mere reference, and so also some interesting researches on the general subject of playing cards by Singer in England. The latter believed that the old Venetian game called Trappola was the earliest European form of card playing, and that it was of Arabian origin, and that the 52 cards used for the purpose derived from that region. I do not gather that any importance was ever attached to this view. Duchesne, something like that, and Singer were followed by another English writer, W.A. Chatto, who reviewed the available facts and the cloud of speculations which had already arisen on the subject. This was in 1848, and his work still has a kind of standard authority, but after every allowance for a certain righteousness attributable to the independent mind, it remains an indifferent and even a poor performance. It was, however, characteristic in its way of the approaching middle night of the 19th century. Chatto rejected the Egyptian hypothesis, but as he was at very little pains concerning it, he would scarcely be held to displace Court de Gebelin if the latter had any firm ground beneath its hypothesis. In 1854, another French writer, Waite, took up the general question, maintaining the Oriental origin of the tarot cards, though without attempting to prove it. I am not certain, but I think this is the first writer who definitely identified them with the gypsies. For him, however, the original gypsy was home was in India, and Egypt did not therefore enter into his calculation. In 1860, there arose Eliphas Levi, a brilliant and profound illuminee, whom it is impossible to accept, and with whom it is even more impossible to dispense. There was never a mouth declaring such great things of all the Western voices which have proclaimed or interpreted the science called occult and the doctrine called magical. I suppose that fundamentally speaking, he cared as much and as little as I do for the phenomenal part, but he explained the phenomena with the assurance of one who openly regarded charlatanry as a great means to an end, if used in the right cause. That is a wonderful characterization of Levy's writing. He came unto his own, and his own received him. Also, at his proper valuation as a man of great learning, which he never was, and a revealer of all mysteries without having been received into any. I do not think that there was ever an instance of a writer with greater gifts after their particular kind, who put them in such indifferent uses. After all, he was only Atea a second time in the flesh, endowed with his endowed with in his transmutation with a mouth of gold and a wider causal knowledge. This notwithstanding, he has written the most comprehensive, brilliant, enchanting history of magic which has ever been drawn into writing in any language. The tarot and the Degebelin hypothesis he took into his heart of hearts, and all occult France and all esoteric Britain, Martinists, half-instructed Kabbalists, schools of sui distant theosophy, here, and everywhere have accepted his judgment about it with the same confidence as his interpretation of those great classics of Kabbalism, which he had skimmed rather than read. The tarot for him was not only the most perfect instrument of divination and the keystone of occult science, but it was the primitive book, the sole book of the ancient magi, the miraculous volume which inspired all the sacred writings of antiquity. In his first work, Levy was content, however, with accepting the construction of Court de Gebelin and reproducing the seventh trump major with a few Egyptian characteristics. The question of tarot transmission through the gypsies did not occupy him till J.A. Valiant, a bizarre writer with a great knowledge of the Romany people, suggested it in his work on those wandering tribes. The two authors were almost coincident and reflected one another thereafter. It remained for Romain Merlin in 1869 to point out what should have been obvious, namely, that cards of some kind were known in Europe prior to the arrival of the gypsies in or about 1417. But as this was their arrival in Lüneburg, and as their presence can be traced antecedently, the correction loses a considerable part of its force. It is safer, therefore, to say that the evidence for the use of the tarot by the Romany tribes was not suggested till after the year 1840. The fact that some gypsies before this period were found using cards is quite explicable on the hypothesis, not that they brought them into Europe, but that they found them there already and added them to their stock in trade. We have now seen that there is no particular evidence for the Egyptian origin of tarot cards. Looking in other directions, it was once advanced on naive authority that cards of some kind were invented in China about the year AD 1120. Court de Gebelin believed this in zeal, and he had traced them to a Chinese inscription of great imputed antiquity, which is said to refer to the subsistence of the waters of the deluge. The characters of this inscription were contained in 77 compartments, and this constitutes the analogy. India had also its tablets, whether cards or otherwise, and these have suggested similar slender similitudes. But the existence, for example, of 10 suits or styles or 12 numbers each, and representing the avatars of Vishnu as a fish, a tortoise, boar, lion, monkey, hatchet, umbrella, or bow as a goat, a bood as a horse, in fine, are not going to help us towards the origin of our own trumps major, nor do crowns and harps, nor even the presence of possible coins as a synonym of deniers and perhaps as an equivalent of pentacles, do much to elucidate the lesser arcana. If every tongue and period and clime and period possessed their cards, if with these they've also philosophized, divined, and gambled, the fact would be interesting enough. But unless they were tarot cards, they would illustrate only the universal tendency of man to be pursuing the same things in more or less the same way. I end, therefore, the history of this subject by repeating that it has no history prior to the 14th century, when the first rumors were heard concerning cards. They may have existed for centuries, but this period would be early enough. If they were only intended for people to try their luck at gambling or their luck at seeing the future, on the other hand, they contain the deep intimations of secret doctrine. Then the 14th century again is early enough, or at least in this respect, we are getting as much as we can. Boom. I actually think that was a great chapter. Um, it started off kind of boring because there are a lot of names being thrown around and stuff like that. But it sort of built up into a mic drop moment. A.E. Waite is actually a really strong writer. That passage on Alephus Levy was really fantastic. Even though I like Levy a lot. It is true that Levy just has a silver tongue, though. Okay. Okay. I got two people in chat. I am contemplating taking a break here. For like 10 minutes. Something like that. Does that jive with everybody? And by everybody, I mean two people. How long is this? Oh, this is long. All right, is everything good? Is the stream coming through? Is it like choppy? Is the sound all right? Is the music too loud? Is there anything going on like that? I am doing a lot of reading. It's all good. Great. Awesome. Thank you both so much for coming, by the way. Hopefully, more people will show up in the while I take a break. Probably not, but you know, um, whatever. I'm having a good time, and I hope you guys are having a good time too. Oh, I got a third person here. Hooray. Third person. You can lurk if you want. I'm about to take a 10-minute break. I just finished a very long section of reading, so I'm going to hydrate. I'm going to use the restroom. And I'll be back on at around 9:30. Hello there, Alchemy. Happy New Year to you too. I am just reading through A.E. Waite, and his Pictoral Key to the Tarot. I just read a very big, long, fucking section of it, um, and there's another section that I'd like to read before the evening is done. I was hoping that I would have enough people in here to have like a discussion afterwards on like Discord or something, but I don't think that's going to be a thing, unfortunately. Um, yeah, yeah, it has been nice. I've been enjoying reading this at the very least. Um, but I did have some people in here before, um, so I'm kind of waiting for them to. Hopefully, they come back, and I want to wait a few minutes before I launch back into it. Um, how you doing, Alchemy? What's up, Muso Patty? I thought you had gone. I see only. It says there's only one person in here, but it looks like there are at least two. Short comics, hell yeah! Awesome, love to see it. I want to see your work when as it's going. Oh, okay, maybe that's why. Um, yeah, I'm hoping to get a 3-person average for this stream, because I'm trying to get affiliate. That's the goal here. Please do keep me in the loop. I do want to know. I could probably take this world card off here. Um, that looks a little better, I think. I waited to see if anybody else. Do I have a subscribe button? I think I do. Do I not? I might not. I just started doing this, so I have not set this up, basically. But I can't run ads. It says only affiliate and partner channels are eligible for ads. All right, I got 3 people. All right. 3 people is probably enough to start. I'm going to read through this second one, and I think that's going to be the stream for the night. This looks like it's about as long as the previous one. I can't tell if me reading through this is like super annoying or if it's working like an audiobook. I'm hoping that it's I'm hoping that the information is being absorbed. I'm hoping that my voice isn't horribly grating. Also, anybody in the chat, please feel free to like chime in and make it a discussion if you feel like it. I am not opposed to stopping and talking and doing anything like that. All right. Let's do this. The Tarot and Secret Tradition. The tarot embodies symbolical presentations of universal ideas, behind which lie all the implicits of the human mind, and it is in this sense that they contain secret doctrine, which is the realization by the few truths embedded in the consciousness of all, though they have not passed into express recognition by ordinary men. The theory that this doctrine has always existed, that is to say, has been excogitated in the consciousness of an elect minority, that it has been perpetuated in secrecy from one to another, and has been recorded in the secret literatures, like those of alchemy and Kabbalism. It is contained also in those instituted mysteries of which Rosicrucianism offers an example near to our hand in the past, and craft masonry, a living summary or general memorial for those who can interpret its real meaning. Behind the secret doctrine, and I think, by the way, the secret doctrine here is capitalized because it's a reference to Madame Blavatsky's book, The Secret Doctrine. Behind the secret doctrine, hold on, I'm getting a text message. Behind the secret doctrine, it is held that there is an experience or practice by which the doctrine is justified. It is obvious that in a handbook like the present, I could do little more than state the claims, which, however, have been discussed at length in several of my other writings. While it is designed to treat 2 of its more important phases in books devoted to the secret tradition in Freemasonry and the Hermetic literature. As regards tarot claims, it should be remembered that some considerable part of the imputed secret doctrine has been presented in the pictorial emblems of alchemy, so that the imputed Book of Thoth is in no sense a solitary device of this emblematic kind. Now, alchemy had 2 branches, as I have explained fully elsewhere, and the pictorial emblems which I have mentioned are common to both divisions. Its material side is represented in this strange symbolism of the mutus liber, printed in the great folios of the Mengentus. There, the process for the performance of the great work of transmutation is depicted in 14 copper plate engravings, which exhibit the different stages of the matter in the various chemical vessels. Above these vessels, there are mythological, planetary, solar, and lunar symbols, as if the powers and virtues which, according to Hermetic teaching, preside over the development and perfection of the metallic kingdom were intervening actively to assist the 2 operators who are toiling below. The operators, curiously enough, are male and female. The spiritual side of alchemy is set forth in the much stranger emblems of the Book of Lambspring. And of this I have already given a preliminary interpretation to which the reader may be referred. The tract contains the mystery of what is called the mystical or arch natural elixir, being the marriage of the soul and spirit in the body of the adept philosopher, and the transmutation of the body as the physical result of this marriage. I have never met with more curious intimations than in this one little work. It may be mentioned as a point of fact that both tracts are very much later in time than the latest date that could be assigned to the general distribution of tarot cards in Europe by the most drastic form of criticism. They belong respectively to the ends of the 17th and 16th centuries. As I am not drawing here on the font of imagination to refresh that of fact and experience, I do not suggest that the tarot set the example of expressing secret doctrine in pictures, and that it was followed by Hermetic writers, but it is noticeable that it is perhaps the earliest example of this art. It is also the most Catholic, because it is not by attribution or otherwise a derivative of any one school or literature or occultism. It is not of astrology or Kabbalism or astrology or ceremonial magic. Excuse me, alchemy, Kabbalism, astrology, or ceremonial magic. But as I have said, it is the presentation of universal ideas by means of universal types, and it is in the combination of these types, if anywhere, that presents the secret doctrine. That combination may, ex hypothesi, reside in the numbered sequence of its series or in their fortuitous assemblage by shuffling, cutting, and dealing, as in ordinary games of chance played with cards. Two writers have adopted the first view without prejudice to the second, and I shall do well, perhaps, to dispose at once of what they have said. Mr. MacGregor Mathers, a pamphlet on the tarot, which was in the main devoted to fortune telling, suggests that the 22 trumps major could be constructed following their numerical order in what he called a connected sentence. It was, in fact, the heads of a moral thesis on the human will, its enlightenment by science, represented by the magician, its manifestation by action, a significance attributed to the high priestess, its realization, the empress, in deeds of mercy and beneficence, which qualities were allocated to the emperor. He spoke also in the familiar conventional manner of prudence, fortitude, sacrifice, hope, and ultimate happiness. But if this were the message of the cards, it is certain that there would be no excuse for publishing them at this day or taking the pains to elucidate them at some length. In his Tarot of the Bohemians, a work written with zeal and enthusiasm, sparing no pains of thought or research within its particular lines, but unfortunately without any real insight, Dr. Papoose has given a singularly elaborate scheme of the trumps major. It depends, like that of Mr. Mathers, from the numerical sequence, but exhibits their interrelation in the divine world, the macrocosm and microcosm. In this manner, we get, as it were, a spiritual history of man, or of the soul coming out from the eternal, passing into the darkness of the material body, and returning to the height. I think that the author is here within a measurable distance of the right track, and his views are to this extent informing, but his method in some respects confuses the issue and the modes and beings of and planes of being. The trumps major have also been treated in the alternative method which I have mentioned, and Grand Orient in his Manual of Cartomancy, under the guise of a mode of transcendental divination, has really offered the result of certain illustrative readings of the cards when arranged as a result of a fortuitous combination by means of shuffling and dealing. The use of divinatory methods, with whatsoever intention and for whatever purpose, carries with it two suggestions. It may be thought that the deeper meanings are imputed rather than real, but this is disposed of by the fact that certain cards, like the Magician, the High Priestess, the Wheel of Fortune, the Hanged Man, the Tower, or the Maison Dupe, and several others, which do not correspond to conditions of life, art, science, virtues, or the other subjects contained in the denaries of the Baldini emblematic figures. They are also proof positive that obvious and natural moralities cannot explain the sequence.
Such cards testify concerning themselves after another manner. And although the state in which I have left the tarot in respect of its historical side is so much more difficult as it is so much the more open, they indicate the real subject matter which we are also concerned. The methods show also that the trumps major at least have been adapted to fortune telling rather than belong thereto. The common divinatory meanings which will be given in the third part are largely arbitrary attributions, or the product of secondary and uninstructed intuition, or at the very most, they belong to the subject on a lower plane, apart from the original intention. If the tarot were a fortune telling in the root matter thereof, we should have to look in a very strange places for the motive which devised it, to witchcraft and the Black Sabbath rather than any secret doctrine. The two classes of significance which are attached to the tarot in the superior and inferior worlds, and the fact that no occult or other writer has attempted to assign anything but a divinatory meaning to the minor arcana, justify it in yet another manner the hypothesis that the two series do not belong to one another. It is possible that their marriage was effected first in the Tarot of Bologna by that Prince of Pisa who I mentioned in the first part. It is said that his device obtained for him public recognition and reward from the city of his adoption, which would scarcely have been possible even in those fantastic days for the production of a tarot which only omitted a few of the small cards. But as we are dealing with a question of fact, which has to be accounted for somehow, it is conceivable that a sensation might have been created by a combination of the minor and gambling cards with the philosophical set, and by the adaptation of both to a game of chance. Afterwards, it would have been further adapted to that other game of chance, which is called fortune telling. It should be understood here that that's a really interesting sentence, by the way. That other game of chance, which is called fortune telling. It should be understood here that I am not denying the possibility of divination, but I take exception as a mystic to the dedications which bring people into these paths as if they had any relation to the mystic quest. The tarot cards which are issued with the small edition of the present work, that is to say, with the key to the tarot, have been drawn and colored by Miss Pamela Coleman Smith, and I will, I think, be regarded as very striking and beautiful in their design alike and execution. They are reproduced in the present enlarged edition of the key as a means of reference to the text. They differ in many important respects from the conventional archaisms of the past and from the wretched products of the colportage which now reach us from Italy, and it remains for me to justify their variations so far as the symbolism is concerned. That for once in modern times I present a pack which is the work of an artist does not, I presume, call for an apology, even to the people, if any remain among us, who used to be described and to call themselves very occult. If anyone would look at the gorgeous tarot valet or not or knave who is emblazoned on one of the pages of Chateau's Facts and Speculations concerning the history of playing cards, he will know that Italy in the old days produced some splendid packs. I could only wish that it had been possible to issue the restored and rectified card in the same style and size. Such a course would have done fuller justice to the designs, but the result would have proved unmanageable for those practical purposes which are connected with cards, and for which allowance must be made, whatever my views thereon. For the variations in the symbolism by which the designs have been affected, I alone am responsible. In respect of the major arcana, they are sure on occasion they are sure to occasion criticism among students, actual and imputed. I wish therefore to say, within the reserves of courtesy and la haute convenience belonging to the fellowship of research, that I care nothing utterly for any view that may find expression. There is a secret tradition containing the tarot, as well as a secret doctrine contained therein. I have followed some part of it without exceeding the limits which are drawn about matters of this kind, and belong to the laws of honor. This is really important. This is a really important sentence. The reason this is really important is he is saying outright that his deck contains blinds. He is saying outright that there is a secret doctrine within the tarot, and I have not divulged all of it. This is important. This tradition has two parts, and one of them is passed into writing. It seems to follow that it may be betrayed at any moment, which will not signify, because the second, as I have intimated, has not so passed at present, and is held by very few indeed. The purveyors of spurious copy and the traffickers in stolen goods may take note of this point if they please. I ask, moreover, to be distinguished from 2 or 3 writers in recent times who have thought fit to hint that they could say a good deal more if they liked, for we do not speak the same language, but also from anyone who now or hereafter may say that she or he will tell all, because they have only the accidents and not the essentials necessary for such disclosure. If I have followed on my part the counsel of Robert Burns by keeping something to myself, which I scarcely tell any, I have still said as much as I can. It is the truth after its own manner, and as much as may be expected or required in those outer circles where the qualifications of special research cannot be expected. By the way, when he says outer circles, he is talking about the outer circles of the Golden Dawn. In regards to the minor arcana, they are the first in modern, but not in all times, to be accompanied by pictures. In addition to what is called the pips, that is to say, the devices belonging to the numbers of the various suits. These pictures respond to the divinatory meanings, which have been drawn from many sources. To sum up, therefore, the present division of this key is devoted to the trumps major. It elucidates their symbols in respect to the higher intention and with reference to the design of the pack. The third division will give the divinatory significance in respect to the 78 tarot cards, and with particular reference to the designs of the minor arcana. I think I said earlier that the tarot had 72 cards. I really hope I didn't. That would be dumb. It will give, in fine, some modes of use for those who require them, and in the sense of the reason which I have already explained in the preface. That which hereinafter follows should be taken for purpose of comparison in connection with the general description of the old tarot trumps in the first part. There it will be seen that the 0 card of the Fool is allocated, as it always is, to the place which makes it equivalent to the number 21. Now, this is a really interesting claim because it's a bunch of bullshit. He attributes the letter Shin to the Fool, which is a remarkable claim. I don't know how to even parse that. There may be a history behind that. I know that Levy's tarot misattributes the Hebrew letters. Maybe he's getting it from there. The arrangement is ridiculous on the surface, which is not much to signify, but is also wrong on the symbolism. Nor does this fare better when it is made to replace the 22nd of the sequence. Attilio recognized the difficulties of both attributions, but he only made bad worse by allocating the Fool to the place which it is usually occupied by the Ace of Pentacles as the last of the whole tarot series. This rearrangement has been followed by Papoose recently in Le Tarot Divinatoire, where the confusion is of no consequence, as the findings of fortune-telling depend upon fortuitous positions and not upon essential place in the general sequence of the cards. I have seen yet another allocation of the 0 symbol, which no doubt obtains in certain cases, but it fails on the highest planes. For our present requirements, it would be idle to carry the examination further. What time is it? 9:54. That is an hour and a half of reading. I am going to save this, getting into the trumps and their inner symbolism, for next week. I'm hoping to do this book and other books that are directly about the tarot on Mondays. And then I'm going to do on Tuesdays books on Kabbalah and astrology, the underlying system of the tarot, right? So both days are about the tarot, but the second day, like Tuesday, is going to be the esoteric stuff, and Monday is going to be the exoteric stuff. Does that make sense? Well, thank you so much for hanging in there, Muso. It was an absolute pleasure. I hope to see you again. Though I won't fault you if you don't stay up so late. And are my brownies ready? Love it. Um, Great. Well, I will. I'll see you when I see you again. I'll be doing this tomorrow night with Dion Fortune's book on the Kabbalah, the mystical Kabbalah, which is a magnificent book if you've never read it. And hopefully we can get some more people in here. Hopefully, I also had an average viewership of 3, which would make for a step towards affiliate. Awesome. Then I'll see you tomorrow night. It's great to chat with you, Muso. All right, everybody, I am going to sign off for the moment. And I love you all, and thank you for hanging in there and listening to my annoying voice. Have a good night.